but they're not gaining amongst your just regular college educated voters.
No, Schumer was not correct, my friend.
Right, exactly, and they're not gaining, and they're losing ground amongst all non-college voters. And so for well, just to give you another recent example, while it's a sort of left-wing version of it, the polls were horribly wrong in Bolivia. So in populism in Latin America tends, other than Brazil and Argentina, tends to take a left-leaning hue. For a range of historical reasons, largely because the conservatives in Latin America have the same reputation they do in parts of Michigan and Wisconsin, which is the corporate and actual fascist types. I mean, people who do coups and send disappear millions of people. That sadly, that's the history. So the indigenous party that's populist in Bolivia was estimated to get between 27 and 32% of the vote throughout the entire election amongst 4 candidates. On election night, they got 53%. The polls were wrong by 21 points.
Wow.
Who did they miss? Rural, working class voters over 45. I mean, it's the same group. I've been studying it in Colombia a couple of years ago. Same problem. There have been polls all across the world that have been missing this group. Part of the Brexit polls were missing this group in the UK. So there's just a long history of polling in the last 10 years, a long history over 80 years. If you go back, they've always missed working class rural voters.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
Missing them at a record. This is why Gallup underestimated the Democratic margin in 1936, 1940, and 1944 before he had the massive miss in 1948. And to his credit, he wasn't as bad as the other pollsters. Roper was off by 18 points in 1948. It's because rural working class voters, particularly rural working class men, have always been difficult to poll, and they've become notoriously difficult to poll in the last 6 years. They're like, whatever. There's not enough incentive for them to participate. Then they get it, and because they've been bombarded by,
and they're just angry too, though, Robert. They're just angry. They don't like us.
Like posters, don't trust.
They don't like us, brother. I'm telling you.
If they sit there and have to listen to somebody, and they can tell in the tone of the response that they don't like their answers, they're like, why in the world did I take this poll? So because a lot of the people that are in the call centers doing the live phone polling are almost all Democratic. Some of these pollsters are using foreign call centers. It's like,
they are. Yeah,
there's no way you're going to get a responsive.
Did I ever tell you about Laura's? Did I ever tell you about Laura's encounter? I mean, it was like horrible. I mean, the bottom line was, they in a nutshell, they called. First of all, they asked, and it was heart research. There was definitely not somebody. They had an accent. I'm not going to say which one, but it was an accent.
A lot of women that were a bunch of calls.
It was okay, fine. She doesn't care. It was a Hispanic woman, but you don't make listen. In 2016, go back to 2016.
They're using national call centers. You don't use national call centers to call a local location unless you really have a great national call center. You don't want people from New York calling people in rural Wisconsin. They're not.
It sounded like where do you think regionally that woman was from? Yeah, regionally she was from probably the north, probably New York. Like it sounded like a New York Hispanic accent. And
there's a bunch of call centers in New Jersey. But they're not the ones to use for this. For polling, ideally, I mean, that's the reason why occasionally the Iowa pollster Seltzer will be good in Iowa, is I believe she uses a local Iowa call center.
Yeah, probably.
And what that does is that means the person feels much more comfortable answering the phone. But if you think some, working class Italian in South Philly, or definitely a rural working class voter, is going to answer the phone call when they don't understand the accent, that ain't happening.
It's crazy. Yeah, well, they shamed her. First of all, I picked up the phone and they asked for her. And I'm like, that's not a random poll. I picked up the phone and immediately they killed him, right? Because I'm a 30-something at the time year white man, and she's a Hispanic woman. So what do you think she's most likely to do? Anyway, so I phoned, give her the poll. When she did it, she loved it. Because he's like, okay, so thinking about the 2016 election, right? And she's like, who are you voting for? And Laura's big grin on her face. She's like, Donald J. Trump. You should have heard her. She was like, oh, okay. It was like total 101, what you do not do on a live caller interview. And then I heard it and I just grabbed it and I'm like, who are you calling from? What research firm is this? And she's like, well, I can't tell you who we're conducting the poll for. I said, I didn't say that. Who are you doing it from? And she spilled it. And she was like, heart research, heart, whatever. And I'm like, oh, okay, Richard. All
And
right.
that's the
This is
problem.
not how this is done.
Some of these, as you've noted, it's a problem with exit polls too. But a lot of these university pollsters use their own students in the
Yes,
call
they
center,
do. Yes.
and there you're going to have a big bias because all of those students are Democratic. So so for folks out there that maybe new turning in, basically polling went from talking to people in person to talking to landlines to now not being able to reach anybody.
Yeah.
So it used to be 50 to 60% response rate. Now it's like 2% to 5%. Sometimes, if you're lucky, it's 10%. If you're very careful, as Richard is, with how you reach out to them, you're anonymous, you're confidential, don't worry. You use all kinds of modes, so it's not talking to a live person that might have a culture gap.
Yeah.
Then you can get higher and better participation rates within more representative samples. But even with all of those efforts, there's people that just won't respond to polls disproportionately. So
Yeah.
that's why the polls, particularly the median university polls that have completed all this nonsense about, they adjusted by education. That wasn't their problem. Wasn't the way they were weighting by education. In some of the polls it was, but that wasn't the big one. The big one was they were just missing working class whites to begin with.